I'm Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy, and welcome to the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. Help, how do I quilt it? I'm sharing some of my favorite quilting designs for common quilt blocks. Sometimes when quilting blocks with multiple shapes, it can be a little bit more difficult to pick the designs. We're going to take everything we've learned the last 5 weeks and put it together to finish this last row in our quilt. When looking at a block like this, the first thing I consider is what's the most important thing? Once I know the element that I want to show off, I can pick designs that will accomplish that. In this first design, I'm going to pretend that this row of squares is what I really want to highlight. And I'm going to pick designs that are really going to emphasize the direction of those blocks. I have all these reference points that I can use as guidelines. So I can work my way from one side to the other, just using the corners of the blocks as a guide. I'm going to quilt a line that extends from the side up towards the center. It's almost kind of like having milestones along the way to keep me on the right track. Now I know it's time to change directions and head down the other side, again using the reference points as my guide. Then I'm going to travel along the edge and then repeat in the next block. I've echoed one side of those green squares, and now I'm going to go do the same on the other side using traveling to get there. Now it might feel just a little weird quilting into the big triangle this way, but it's going to help really enhance the green squares over those triangles. Now that I have my defined area, I can start filling it in. I know I want to work my way down this side, so when I'm touching the squares, I'll do a continuous curved design that'll bring me back to the starting point. But in the triangles, I'll just quilt curves on two of the sides so that I end up at the point on the opposite side. Then I'm going to keep going until I get to the bottom of the block. Once I'm finished with one side of that row, I could go ahead and quilt the other white triangles, but since I'm already on this side of the block, I'm going to go ahead and travel and quilt the lines on this side while I'm here. And while I could stop at the point of my block, I'm going to go ahead and extend these lines out into the background space just to really emphasize that look. Now I have my framework and I just need to fill in the area in between. To keep all the emphasis on the curvy part of the design, I'm not going to do anything too dramatic in here. I'm just going to add a straight line on either side just to echo that effect. Now when I first quilted this original line, I wasn't really planning on extending it out, so I need to travel over and come back and finish that up. When I'm working with blocks like this, I want to handle every area while I'm there. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in this side of the block before I move on to the next. Once I'm in place, then I'm going to go ahead and quilt the same curvy design in those other triangles. And since I'm trying to keep this design somewhat symmetrical, I'm going to quilt this section the same way I quilted that one, with just a few more straight lines. Of course, we could change this up completely and put any different design that we wanted to in these areas. Even if I quilted something other than the echo lines, we're still going to have that beautiful look of movement that's going to highlight those green squares. Okay, in the triangle, I'm going to echo the sides again. These two initial lines right here made a space about an inch or so apart, so I'm going to recreate that with the quilting in the triangle. It's helping me create this shape over and over and over again, but I have to admit I am getting a little tired of straight lines. I can only do so many before I get bored, so I'm going to fill in the space with something different. Maybe some wishbones. Another echo line on the inside, and then I'm more than halfway done with this block. Now it's time to do the same thing on the other side, so I'm going to get over there by traveling, quilting a straight line on the other side of those squares. Now this is starting to look familiar, right? I have my squares and my triangles, and I'm going to do the same thing, quilting those continuous curved designs that are going to help get me to one side and back to the other. Now this little bitty bit at the top, it's not quite the right size to fit a triangle in there, but I'm still going to use that same curvy design I've been using in the rest of these small little triangles. And this is the fun thing about quilting blocks with multiple shapes. There's a good chance I end up somewhere other than I need to be. But I don't let that deter me. I'm just going to use traveling to get back to where I need to go so I can continue quilting this block. I think it's fine to have a plan before you start, but just understand that if the plan isn't working, you might have to switch it up. And now that I've got that finished, I just need to add a few more echo lines on the other side, and then it's done. Now this design does have a lot of straight lines, but those are all going to emphasize my favorite part of the quilt. Adding a little bit of texture with the continuous curve and the wishbones is going to break it up just a bit, keep it from being too monotonous, and the result is a beautiful design. For this design, we're going to pretend that all these blocks joined together create the shape that we want to show off the most. We're going to do that by combining designs, adding some echo lines, and filling it in to make it look gorgeous. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is use the quilting to define the boundary of my area. This is going to be the quickest and easiest way to not only identify the shape, but begin to fill it in. Then once I have the area defined, I can go about picking the designs I want to use. If I want to group these all together and bring the tension to the center, I could quilt wedges or any design that comes to the center. At this point, it's almost like I'm just ignoring the piecing and focusing on that outer shape. That means I need to get from here to the center. The problem is I don't want to break thread, and there's really nowhere I can travel to make that happen. So I guess I'm just going to have to add another line to the quilting so I can get where I need to go. Now that I'm in the center, I'm going to go ahead and quilt some wedges in that first section. So even though I don't normally quilt my wedges so that there's a random line going right down the center, doesn't mean that I can't start now. My quilting motto has always been, once is a mistake, but twice is a design choice. So as long as I quilt this section the same as that one, it'll look like that's how I intended it to be. Now in this triangle here, I could go ahead and quilt more of those wedge shapes. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of continuous curve just to break it up a bit. So I'm gonna travel to get to the outer point and then do my continuous curve design in that area. And then do the same on the other side. Now I just need to quilt this last little section of the block, adding more wedges, making sure I leave just a little bit of space for that design element. You know, the straight line in the middle of it, that'll get me to the other side. And my goal is that when I'm done, I'll have the design that groups all those blocks together to highlight the shape that I want to show off. If I'm being honest with you, a lot of my favorite designs have originated from unintentional customizations. So don't get too caught up on perfectionism because you never know where a design choice will lead you. Now let's try something different. I'm going to highlight that same shape with a different design. I've already quilted along the outside of the shape I'm filling in. Now we're going to try a different dot-to-dot technique to join the blocks together. So I'm going to quilt a line that goes from the outer point to the corner of the center square. And then I'm going to quilt another line that goes directly across to the opposite square. Then I'll quilt another straight line to the opposite point from where I started. I'm going to echo the line I've just quilted by swinging out, ending about an inch away from the corner, echoing that side, and going back to my starting point. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the block. That's going to create a dot-to-dot type of echoing that's going to enhance that shape. But I do have a big unquilted area in the center, which I'm going to fill in. I'm going to put some wishbones in here, but you can use any design that works from one side to the opposite. Throughout the 6-week challenge, we've already learned a couple different designs that you could put in this area. You could do some serpentine lines like we did back in the star blocks video. You could do half feathers like we did in the flying geese. Or you could just quilt the line straight across and call it good. And when we're done, we have a design that echoes the sides of the block with a pop of texture in the center. And if you use this design in several blocks over the whole quilt, it would create an amazing secondary design. It's amazing how you can start with the same blocks and create so many different effects just by the designs that you pick. Once I've quilted the most important parts of the quilt, then it's time to fill in the rest. Okay, are you ready for your final challenge? If you're quilting along with me on a custom panel, go ahead and quilt the last row of blocks. I use the gold thread so that you could really see what I'm doing, but it would look even more beautiful when quilted with a coordinating green thread. Don't forget I have quilting diagrams and a tip sheet that you can download. You can find the information about that in the description box below. And you can also check out fmqchallenge.com for links to prior challenges, as well as links to all the quilting diagrams you've seen here. Don't worry, I'll be back soon with another free motion challenge quilting along. Thanks so much for watching. Happy quilting.